pay much attention to anger at all. That we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to teach it, we just allow people to develop their own ways of dealing with anger. And so all of us end up abusing anger. And we don't have to. Now, I learned this lesson from grandfather when I went to live with him as a young boy. I was 12 years old, and I had been beaten up in South Africa by whites and then by blacks because of the color of my skin, and I was filled with rage, and I wanted eye for an eye justice. And it became such an obsession with me that I started doing exercises and pumping iron so that I could build strength to be able to deal with people violently. And that's when my parents took me to India. And the first lesson that grandfather taught me was understanding that anger and being able to channel that energy into positive action. He said anger is like electricity. It's just as powerful and just as useful as electricity is, but only if we use it intelligently. But it can be just as deadly and destructive if we abuse it. So just as we channel electrical energy and bring it into our lives and use it for the good of humanity, we must learn to channel anger in the same way so that we can use that energy for the good of humanity rather than abuse the energy and cause death and destruction. He suggested that I should write an anger journal. He said every time you feel angry about something, don't pour it out on somebody or something, but pour it all out in your journal. But write the journal with the intention of finding a solution to the problem, and then commit yourself to finding a solution, which is very important. Because today a lot of people tell me they have been writing an anger journal for a long time, but it hasn't really helped them. Because every time they go back and read the journal, they are reminded of the incident and they get angry all over again. Now, we don't want to get angry all over again. We want to be able to put that behind us. So it's very important that we write the journal with the intention of finding a solution and then commit ourselves to finding a solution. I did this for many years, and I must say it helped me considerably in learning how to deal with my anger in a positive manner. But after learning this profound lesson from him, I wanted to see whether he himself had learned the lesson or not. And this was the time in his life where, as I said, he was working on many different things. He was not only fighting the British, but he was concerned about all of these other problems in society. And so he had programs going on in all these different fields. And all the programs needed to be funded. And in those days, the funding was controlled by the British, and they were not willing to fund the programs, and so he had to find his own means of funding it. So he decided to sell his autograph. And every morning and evening, when hundreds and thousands of people would attend his prayer services, all of them would seek his autograph. And he put a fee of 5 rupees, which would translate in today's money to about $5. For each autograph. And while I was living with him, it was my duty to go out into the audience and collect the autograph books and the money and bring it to him for his signature. And one day I thought to myself, I said, if everybody could get his autograph, why not me? After all, I'm his grandson and I deserve an autograph too. And so I got myself a little autograph book, and I didn't have any money, so I slipped it into the pile, and I was hoping that he wouldn't notice the absence of money there. But when he came to that book, he said, why is there no money for this autograph? And I said, because it's my book. And he said, well, you should know that I don't make an exception even for grandsons. That if you want an autograph, you will not only have to pay me for it, but you'll have to earn the money and pay me. Don't ask your parents for it. And I said, no way. I said, you're my grandfather and I'm going to make you give me this autograph. So he laughed and said, all right, let's see who wins. high-level political discussions with British politicians or Indian politicians, I would barge into the room with my autograph book and thrust it in his face and demand an autograph. My logic was that just to get rid of me, he would sign the book and give it to me. But instead, every time I became too boisterous, all he did was put his hands across my mouth, press my head against his chest, and went on talking politics. The other politicians on many occasions used to get exasperated and tell grandfather, why don't you give him the autograph and be done with it? He disturbs our meetings every day. And grandfather would only laugh and say, this is a private joke between the two of us, you don't have to get involved in it. But the long and short of it is that he never did give me the autograph. But I don't remember his ever telling me to get out of the room and leave him alone, as we would do with our children or siblings. If they came into the room, we shoo them out rudely, tell them, get out, can't you see I'm busy just now, we'll talk about it some other time. He never ever did that to me. And that's when I realized that if he was able to control his anger to that extent, if we attempt to achieve 50% of that goal, we would make a tremendous difference in the level of violence that we experience in our lives as well as in the lives of our society and our nations, and even internationally. Because experts today tell us that almost 80% of the violence that we experience is generated by anger. So it's very important that we learn how to deal with anger and how to use that energy in positive action. And nonviolence is also about building relationships. Now that is another very important aspect, as we can see today, our relationships at all levels, whether it's at personal level or national level or international level. It's always based on what am I going to get from it? What am I going to benefit from it? Even our foreign policy is based on what is good for the United States. And we are going to do that which is good for the United States, and we don't care about the world. And that reflects in our own relationships with each other. We are always trying to milk each other to get the most benefits there. And when we can't get anything out of each other, then we break off the relationship. And grandfather said that's not the way to build relationships. That's a greedy, very negative way of building relationships. Relationships must be built on the 4 principles of respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. We have to respect ourselves and respect each other and respect our connection with all of creation, which is very important because a lot of people today tell me that we are independent individuals and we can do whatever we like and it's nobody's business. We are not independent individuals. We are interdependent, interconnected, and interrelated, and we have to respect that. And when we respect that, then we will understand who we are and what we are and why are we here on earth. We are not here by accident. We are here to fulfill a purpose. And we will be able to fulfill that purpose only when we know what our connection with creation is. And when we come to understand that, then we will be able to accept each other as human beings and not identify people by the labels that we have put upon each other. Today we have so many labels to identify people. We have economic labels and social labels and cultural labels and religious labels and God knows how many labels. You name it and we have a label for it. And every time we put a label on a person, we are building a wall between that person and ourselves. And every wall that we build between people is the potential for conflict. So we've got to remove all these labels and just look at each other as human beings. And it's only when we can look at each other as human beings that we would then be able to appreciate our own humanity. And this is very important not only in our personal relationships with each other, but even in our international relationships with each other. Today we are being told, especially here in this country, because we are at war now and we are in a kind of crisis, and we are told that we have to be patriotic. And patriotism means that we have to think about our country and our people and safeguard our corner of the world. The implication there is that we can create security around our borders and secure our nation and be happy when the rest of the world can go down the drain and we don't care about it. Now, we can't survive in this part of the world if the rest of the world is going down the drain. Our security is tied up with the security of the rest of the world. And the only way we can be secure in our country is if we can ensure security for all the world and everybody in the world. So there has to be that kind of interaction between people. Not just the government-to-government relationship. We can't sit back and say, well, our government is giving aid to this country and that's it. That doesn't work. We have to work between people. There has to be a relationship between people there, and we have to be together with each other. Because there's such a lot of misunderstanding and ignorance about each other. Because we tend to live in our own isolated communities. I go to the universities and colleges in this country, and I am always pained to see how the student body is so divided. That they have all these different ethnic, cultural groups and student groups who do their own thing and you know, that's it, and the majority community never participates in it. And, you know, it's a very sad state of affairs, because when we go to a university or go to a college, we go there to enlighten ourselves, to learn, to broaden our perspectives. But if we carry the narrowness and the narrow perspectives of society into the places of learning, we are not learning anything at all. What universities and colleges, and I'm saying this with great apology to you as the president of this wonderful college, and what these educational institutions have become is a place where you can get a career and go out into the marketplace and make money. And that is not enough. That's not education of people. Education has to be well-rounded. It has to be total education, and that is lacking everywhere. I'm not saying that in this country alone, but everywhere. Because everything is determined by materialism. It's about making money, and that is the yardstick that we use for success. And so it's how much money you make and how much you possess that is important in the world. And that has to change if we want to create peace. It has to be much more than that. It has to be something where we can relate to each other and understand each other and come closer to each other. And this is what universities and colleges should do. Foster the students coming together and participating in each other's festivals and programs and understanding each other and learning about each other and creating those bridges that we need, which they can carry out from these universities to the society outside. So these are aspects that we have to be very conscious of. But unfortunately, and I want to end this, I know I'm going on this, and probably boring you to death. But I want to share with you two stories which show how we perpetuate violence, the culture of violence in society. How generation after generation they go on believing in the culture of violence. And yet culture of violence is not part of human nature. A lot of people, because we have lived in this culture for such a long time, that we have come to believe that this is part of human nature and this is how we are and there's nothing we can do about it. And I disagree with them because I tell them that if violence was our nature, we wouldn't need military academies and martial arts institutes to teach us how to fight and kill. The fact that we need these institutions indicates that this is a learned experience and that we can unlearn it also. So we have to switch this culture of violence that is very convenient. I know it's very easy to suppress somebody violently and control people through fear, because that's what culture of violence is, controlling through fear. And we do this with our children. When we threaten our children at home that if you don't behave, you're going to be punished, you're going to be grounded, or you're going to sit in the corner, or whatever the punishment is, we are telling our children that violence is right, that when somebody does something wrong, that person needs to be punished. And that is how we perpetuate this. So the story that I want to share with you is something that happened to me at the age of 16. When I came back to South Africa after living with grandfather, and we were living in the community that grandfather had started, which was 18 miles outside the city of Durban, in the midst of sugarcane plantations. Our nearest neighbors were miles away from us, so when my two sisters and I were growing up there, we didn't have anybody our age to relate to. We would look forward to going into town and visiting friends or seeing a movie or something. And one Saturday I got that opportunity when my father had to go to town to attend a conference, and he didn't feel like driving that day, and so he asked me if I would drive him into town. And I jumped at the opportunity and said yes. And since I was going into town, my mother gave me a list of groceries that she needed. And on the way into town, my father reminded me of all the little chores that had been pending for a long time. And he said, since you have the whole day to yourself, will you please attend to these chores? Like getting the car serviced and oil changed and all that. And I said, okay. And when I dropped him off at the conference venue, he said, at 5 o'clock in the evening, I will wait for you outside this auditorium. Come here and pick me up and we'll go home together. And I said, okay. And I rushed off and I did all my chores and I bought all the groceries and did everything I was expected to do. And being a 16-year-old, I went straight to the nearest movie theater. And I got so engrossed in a John Wayne double feature that I didn't realize the passage of time. The movie ended at 5:30. And I ran from there to the garage and got the car and rushed to where my father was waiting for me. It was almost 6 when I reached there, 1 hour late. And he was naturally anxious and wondering what happened to me, and he was pacing up and down. And so the first question he asked me is, why are you late? And instead of telling him the truth, I was so ashamed to tell him that I was sitting there watching a John Wayne double feature, that I lied to him and I said the car wasn't ready, I had to wait for the car, not realizing that he had already called the garage and asked. When he caught me in the lie, he said, there's something wrong in the way I brought you up that didn't give you the confidence to tell me the truth, that you felt you had to lie to me. And I've got to find out where I went wrong with you. And in order to do that, he said, I'm going to walk home 18 miles. I'm not coming with you in the car. There was absolutely nothing I could do to make him change his mind. He just started walking. It was after 6 o'clock in the evening. Much of those 18 miles were through sugarcane plantations, dirt roads, late night, no lights. I couldn't leave him and go away. So for 5.5 hours, I was crawling behind him in the car, watching him go through that pain and agony for the stupid lie that I uttered. And I decided there and then that I was never going to lie again. And I think that was a very powerful lesson in nonviolent parenting. If he had punished me the way we would punish our children when we catch them doing something wrong, I don't think I would have learned the lesson. I think I would have just suffered the punishment and gone on doing the same thing, making sure the next time I don't get caught. But by taking the responsibility on himself, and instead of punishing me, doing penance for the wrong that I did, he taught me such a powerful lesson that it lives with me even today. So that is the power of nonviolence, and that is where we have to begin, by changing ourselves and changing our attitudes, changing our relationships, so that we can ultimately bring peace in this world. It has to begin with each one of us. Now I want to conclude with the last story, a story that grandfather used to be very fond of telling everybody. It's a story of an ancient Indian king who once became very curious about the meaning of peace. And he invited all the intellectuals in his kingdom to come and explain the meaning of peace. And everybody came and tried their best, and nobody could satisfy the king. And after a few days, there was an intellectual from another town who came on a visit, and the king asked him to explain the meaning of peace, and he said, the only person who can give you a satisfactory answer is an old sage who lives outside your kingdom. But he is so old that he cannot come to you. You will have to go to him and ask him this question. And so the next day the king went to the sage and asked him the meaning of peace. And the sage quietly went to the back of the house and came back with a grain of wheat and placed that grain of wheat on the king's palm and said, here is your answer. And of course the king didn't know what a grain of wheat had to do with peace. And he wasn't about to show his ignorance. So he quietly clutched that grain of wheat and went back to his palace, and he found a little gold box. And he placed that grain of wheat in the box. And every morning he would open the box to look for an answer. And he couldn't find any answers. Then a few days later, when this intellectual came back on a return visit, the king asked him to explain. He said, you sent me to the sage and he gave me this grain of wheat, and I don't know what a grain of wheat has to do with peace. And that's when the intellectual said, it's very simple. He said, as long as you keep this grain of wheat in this box, nothing is going to happen. It will eventually rot and perish, and that will be the end of the story. But if you had allowed this grain of wheat to interact with all the elements, if you had planted this outside in the soil, it would sprout and grow, and very soon you could have a whole field of wheat. And that is the meaning of peace. That if you have found peace and if you keep it locked up in your heart for your own personal gains, it will perish with you. But if you let it interact with all the elements, it would sprout and grow, and very soon we could have a whole world of peace. So I have come here this evening to share with you the grain of wheat that I got from my parents and grandparents. And I hope that you won't let it rot and perish, but let it interact so that all of us together can transform this world and make it a world of peace and harmony for future generations. Thank you. A story that I shared with you today, you can share that with the students. I've written a book called The Legacy of Love, which is available also, which you can share with the students. It's written basically for the young students so that they can understand the importance of relations. But there are many things. There are many things on our website also. go to www.gandhiinstitute.org. You'll get a lot of information there too.
What kind of advice would you have for a kid like me who wants to promote peace?
Well, I think you're not just a kid, you're a future leader. And you're going to inherit this country and you're going to inherit this world. And if you are determined, you can transform it. So I have come here to plant that seed in your mind, and I hope you will nourish that seed and let it grow so that it will help you in your later years to understand all the implications of creating peace in the world and then transform the world. So I think you and your generation are very important. Therefore, I go as much as possible to schools to share these experiences with you because you are the leaders of tomorrow.
It seems to me that in this country, the issue of nonviolence and forgiveness have with them a component of acquiescence and inaction, such that people tend to hide behind those things as cowardice, rather than stepping forward and making the sacrifices necessary to act with nonviolence. So the kind of education that we need, I think, that you're talking about is stepping forward and speaking out, but doing it in a peaceful way. Do you agree?
Nonviolence is not pacifism. It's not being passive at all. It's a very active philosophy. It means taking, standing up and doing justice and making a stand, but not making a violent stand, but taking a stand out of love and respect for the opponent. And I think one of the greatest examples in recent times is what the Amish community did in Philadelphia, when they forgave the person who killed their little babies and went to his home and attended his funeral. I think that's the ultimate in forgiveness that anybody can think about it, and my hats off to them.
I really appreciate everything you said, and I see how it applies on a personal level and interpersonal level, but I'm curious how you would say proper response, a peaceful response would be to much larger scale conflicts like the threat from Nazi Germany in the 40s, and even before that. The situation that's going on in Darfur, Sudan right now. I can personally forgive another individual or even a leader of a country full of armies and military that do things out of violence. But when you're the person on the receiving end of that violence from a political institution or a ruler, what is the proper response for that? Because if it's turned the other cheek and that, they die after that, I don't know if that's my opinion.
No, you're quite right, and this is what a lot of people have asked me. But the beauty of nonviolence is it gives us the ability to be proactive. It gives us the ability to see a situation before it becomes a crisis and take care of it. Now, you mentioned the case of Hitler and Nazi Germany. That didn't happen overnight. It had been brewing for a long time. In fact, if you look at history, World War I didn't end at all. It just went on into World War II. So we created Hitler because of our greed and our impatience. And then we suffered the consequences of that kind of creation. And that is the culture of violence. The culture of violence makes it impossible for us to see a conflict before it becomes a crisis. And so it's only when genocide happens in Darfur that we see what is going on there, and when something great happens somewhere that we begin to take notice of it. We ought to be able to look at all of these situations around the world before they become a crisis. and before they can overwhelm us. And that's what nonviolence gives us, the ability to foresee this kind of events and avoid them.
But if I may, what do we do when we haven't been able to foresee those, and we're already overwhelmed as we are, something like California, when the United States entered World War II? What do we do in this current?
Well, we have to get more, we have to look at it from the two perspectives, the immediate needs and the long-term needs. And immediately I would think